Hello. Welcome to my channel. My name is Jennifer and this is Jen the Bookworm. Welcome back if this is not your first time, and welcome if it is your first time. Today I'm doing another book tag. I found this tag on RJ Reads and it looked like a fun tag to do, so I thought I would give it a shot myself. And this is the 20 questions tag. So I've got 20 questions here that I'm going to go through and answer. Obviously all book related stuff, and I hope you enjoy. So the first question is, how many books are too many books in a series? And I say that this kind of depends. If you start reading a series and there's only 2 or 3 books out when you started reading it, if the series ends up with like 14 books in the series, but you've been reading it as it goes, that's probably not going to feel like too much. But if someone says, hey, I've got a series for you, and it's a 14 book series already written before you even start book 1, that might feel a little daunting. But I also kind of think that for like a better answer to this question might be around 5. And the reason I say that is because in most books that I have read, most series that I have read, after about book 5 is about when it starts to get very soap opera-y, or better described as maybe more like a professional wrestling campaign, where they have to do bigger and bigger things to shock you and change things and whatever, because they want to keep you coming back for more. But oftentimes they go bigger and bigger and bigger until the book doesn't even resemble the series that it's a part of, or the characters don't even look anything, not look, but feel anything like the characters from the beginning of the series. So some of them, when they get past around 5 books or so, I'm sure that there's exceptions to this rule, but sometimes less is more. The next question, question 2, how do you feel about cliffhangers? Well, it depends on how well they're executed. I think cliffhangers can be great if they're contained within the book. I think cliffhangers for the end of chapters is great because it makes you want to read the next chapter, and a book that is unputdownable is something you look back on with fondness, and something that, I mean, very rarely are people actually irritated that they stayed up till 3 in the morning reading the book. What they're actually irritated about is that they have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go to work, not that they stayed up until 3 o'clock in the morning reading the book. So having, something to keep you going to the next chapter is great, but having a cliffhanger at the end of the book, it depends on how well it's executed, I guess, but I really prefer that not to be the end of a book. I prefer the end of the book to be somewhat contained, because what if something happens? You never know. When I was a teenager, I watched this show called Muddles, Inc. Probably nobody's heard of this, but it was on after Melrose Place, and yeah, I'm dating myself, but whatever. And Models Inc., I remember not very much about it, actually, but what I remember was the end of it, the end of the season. You've got some model walking down the aisle with her controversial beau, and she's got a child, and all of a sudden you see, like, through the lens of a scope, somebody's gonna kill them, somebody's gonna kill somebody, and you see the woman through the scope, and you see the man through the scope, you see the little kid through the scope, and then the screen goes black, and you hear a bullet shot, and someone has been shot, and then they cancel the show. And I will never forgive them for that. So I don't really love cliffhangers, because you never know when the next book is going to come out. You never know if the next book is going to come out, really. So the third question is hardback or paperback. And right now I do I read off of a Kindle or I listen to an audiobook. But that hasn't always been the case. And I know hardbacks are often preferred by readers, by serious collectors. And honestly, part of me thinks, and I never got on the hardback hype, so maybe I'm off base, but part of me thinks that collecting the hardbacks is not really about the reading hobby. It's a whole other hobby. It's a collecting hobby. It's because hardbacks are not easier to read. They're clunky. You can't lay in bed with them and lay on your back and hold them in one hand, and you drop a hardback on your face and that's going to hurt. Plus, some of them are too fancy to read. Have you ever had that where someone gives you something and it's so fancy you never want to use it because you don't want to mar it? So, I mean, when I was younger, it didn't seem like hardbacks came with like the sprayed edges and all the embossing and the artwork right on the cover. So I remember when I was reading Stephen King's Pet Sematary, you have to take the sleeve off the book. Otherwise, when you're shoving in your book bag, you're going to tear the cover and stuff. So I had just the naked book, and all it had on it was Stephen King's signature. And in unrelated news, when I was in the 7th grade, I knew how to sign Stephen King's signature. But I never really preferred hardback books. I always preferred the paperback books because a paperback used to be a mass market paperback. And I know, everyone, mass market paperback, ooh, boo, that's from the devil. But the mass market paperbacks are all the same size, or at least they used to be. And they had shiny covers and they could stand a little bit of a beating. I was taking my books to school with me or shoving them in my purse so that I could have it with me everywhere. So they could take a little bit of a beating. And honestly, I like the look of a well-worn paperback. So I never minded that. Plus, if ever you said, ooh, I like to read books, and somebody says, oh, me too, I'd like to borrow a book from you, you're only out like $8. At least back then you were only out like $8. I know they're more expensive now, but you're out a little bit of money and a little bit of annoyance for having to repurchase it, but you're not out the 30 to 50 to whatever dollars it costs now to buy a hardback book. So I always liked paperback books myself. So the next question is, what's your favorite book? And that's difficult. It's difficult to answer favorite book. I read so many different genres, and I've read so many new things right now. And some of these new things that I've read are, I don't know, it's hard to say if they're better than the old things or if they're just new, and so therefore better because they're new. But if you're really going to hold a gun to my head about a favorite book, I might say Harry Potter, maybe book 4 or book 6, because that's where things start to get really good. So I guess if I had to say, I would say that. It's a little bit easier to answer the next question, which is, what's my least favorite books? And I have to say New Moon by Stephanie Meyer is a book it really gets on my nerves. And this is like the second book in the Twilight saga. And I read Twilight ages ago. And I didn't hate Twilight, but I really, really was disappointed in the second book by a huge margin. These books are marketed towards teenage girls. And I think, especially now when we're trying so hard to promote stronger women, when we're trying to promote a little, I don't know, a little less codependence, and especially in teenagers. A book where she literally goes into a comatose state for 3 months because her boyfriend moves. I think that's inexcusable when you're marketing this towards teenagers. I think I would let my daughter read it. I wouldn't encourage her to read. I wouldn't force her not to. I wouldn't like tell her she couldn't read it. That I honestly, when you tell a kid they can't do something, it feels like that's the only thing that they want to do. They become obsessed with doing it. So I wouldn't do that, but I wouldn't encourage her to read Twilight at all. I don't care about the other aspects of it. I would not encourage her to read something that's like, it's okay to completely go comatose. It's okay to become a zombie. It's okay to be so stricken with grief at that young age because your boyfriend leaves that you rip your stereo equipment out of your truck until your fingernails are all busted and bloody. And this is ridiculous. This is a ridiculous overreaction. And I realize that in Twilight it's a supernatural love, and so therefore they're going to be together forever. But in reality, teenage girls look at these kinds of things, many teenage girls do, look at these kinds of things and they think this is the way you should react when your boyfriend decides to leave you. By completely closing in on yourself and saying the rest of life doesn't matter at a teenage year. I mean, how often do teenagers think that they fall in love forever with the man or woman that they're going to be with forever? And then next month they're in love with somebody else forever. It's inexcusable in my opinion. Sorry, I have opinions. The second book that I wanted to put on this list was Allegiant by Veronica Roth. This is the third book in the Divergent series. I really kind of liked Divergent 1 and 2, but Divergent 3 got weird. I don't know, I think they were trying to do a Hunger Games thing, where Hunger Games 1 and 2, was about the games, and then the third one turned into more like a war book. And I think Divergent was trying to do something like that with the first two books, seemed to make sense together. In the third book, it took a deep, sharp turn off into genetics and weird judging people by their genetics, and these people are genetically superior to these people and stuff. It was weird. It was not really a good book. It took me a month to read it because I honestly dragged my feet so bad on it. And I was buddy reading it with my cousin, and he's just like, what's taking you so long? But I just couldn't with that one. So those are the two books that are my least favorite books that I remember reading. The next question 6, love triangles, yes or no? Generally no, but it can be done well, and if it's done in a non-annoying way, then sure. And I don't really have a book example of this, but I do have a movie example of this. If anyone has seen Sweet Home Alabama with Reese Witherspoon, I liked the love triangle in that book in that movie, because neither guy was bad. Neither guy was categorically wrong for her. If you've not seen the movie, it's about a Southern girl who moves to the city and is a fashion designer and kind of leaves behind her Southern roots, but she has to go back south for a little bit. And when she does, she sort of rediscovers her Southern roots a little bit, kind of against her will, but she does. And there's an ex-husband, or trying to be an ex-husband in the South, and there's somebody that she's trying to start a life with in the North or in the city. City boy and country boy, and neither boy is bad. Neither one is bad. Both of them look like they would be good picks for her, but she has to pick one. And that is an okay love triangle, I think. But so often when people write love triangles, one of them is categorically a bad idea for the character, or one of them already has a boyfriend or a girlfriend or something like that, or she has a long-standing boyfriend or a girlfriend who she's been with for a while, but now she's looking at someone else, and that's a little less of a love triangle and more like a recipe for cheating. And I don't know, sometimes people write love triangles so weirdly, and it just distracts from the main story, unless that is the main story, and then I'd probably put down the book, because I don't think I could read a book whose sole question was, should she or he date this one or that one. Number 7, most recent book you could not finish. That would be Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about this. I might pick it back up again and try it another time, because I really think I DNF'd it because it wasn't what I was in the mood for. But that was my most recent book that I tried and I couldn't read. Number 8 is a book that you're currently reading. Currently, I am reading Stoner by John Williams, and I am enjoying it, although I'm not really sure why I'm enjoying it so much, because it's such a different kind of book than what I would normally read. But it is fascinating to read, and I am enjoying it a lot. So that's what I'm currently reading. The next question is, what's the last book you recommended to someone? I don't really remember. I remember urging my partner to pick up Oathbringer. He was reading Stormlight Archive with me, and he hasn't picked up Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson yet, so I was kind of encouraging him to do that. And I think I recommended my mom to read the Northern Lights by Nora Roberts. But I think those are the only 2 books I've recommended, other than, doing recommendation review videos on BookTube. So question number 10 is oldest book you've read by publication date. And I was thinking about it, and this is a harder one for me to answer, because I think the one that's the oldest one that I've read for fun was Emma by Jane Austen. But in college, I was in college in English literature, and I was asked to read the Ilium, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid. So those were way older than Jane Austen. So, and I did actually enjoy those books. The Greek mythology aspects of it, the Battle of Troy, which, funny enough, doesn't happen. It's kind of a side piece of the Aeneid. It's not really as big as it's been made out to be by movies and stuff. But those books, I think, are probably the oldest by a publication date. Number 11 is, what's the newest book you've read by publication date? And that would be Stephen King's Fairy Tale, which just came out September 6th of 2022, and I just got finished reading it. So that'd be the newest book that I read. So the next question is, who is my favorite author? Again, a difficult one to pinpoint. I like different genres, and different genres I have favorites in each. So my favorite fantasy author, boy, I don't know. Terry Goodkind has always been my go-to answer for this, but I'm reading so many new fantasy things that I think Terry Goodkind is kind of a nostalgic pick. But if I'm being honest, it would be hard to say that Brandon Sanderson isn't my favorite fantasy author at this point. It's just been, I've been really engrossed in his books for months now. So it's hard to say he's not my favorite fantasy author at this point. As far as romance authors go, Jude Deveraux is still my favorite. She is an older author at this point, really popular in the 90s and such. So maybe if I read more contemporary modern fantasy, I will find, not fantasy, romance, I will find a author to replace her. But I don't know. I really love her still. Last year or the year before, I was going through a reread of everything of hers that I had. I didn't get through them all, but I did get through a huge chunk of them. And every time I picked up a book and read it, I remembered why I loved it and why I loved her. So I don't know, maybe I'll replace her, maybe I won't. And for horror, my favorite author would be John Saul. I don't know if I've ever read a John Saul book that I didn't love. So I would have a hard time saying that one of those 3 authors were better than the other, just because they all do such different genres. Question number 13, buying books or borrowing books? And I have to say, buying books for sure. Not that I am at all putting down anyone who borrows books. If you make use of your library, you handle your money smarter than I do, for sure. But I don't like, I like to have it. I like to have it, and if I want to reread it, I like to be able to just pick it up, and there it is, and I can reread it, not have to try to re-borrow it from whoever I borrowed it from before, or the library, or whatever, and have it not be there when I feel in the mood to reread. And I have historically been a huge rereader, so I buy the books when I can buy the books because I want to be able to come back to them. Now, here soon I'm going to be starting to do Kindle Unlimited, and this isn't buying, this is more borrowing. So I'm going to be trying to do some of that to reduce the amount of money I'm spending on books right now. It's a lot more than I've spent recently. And but I always like to buy the books rather than to borrow them. Number 14 is a book that you disliked that everyone else seemed to love. I'm not sure I actually have an answer for this question. I don't remember there being a book that I disliked so much that everyone else seemed to love. The book that I have been very passionate about disliking so far has been New Moon, but I don't remember so many people loving Twilight to that extent. I mean, I know a lot of people did love Twilight, but I wasn't really a part of BookTube at the time when it was popular, and a lot of people now don't seem to have a lot of regard for Twilight. But so, I mean, I can't think of a book that I dislike that everyone else loves so much. I guess maybe the Divergent series, the last book in the Divergent series, I didn't like it as well. I remember when Divergent first came out, it was all the thing. And I was less about it than other people. Maybe I could say the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. Don't flame me. It's kind of an unfair answer to this question, though, because I've given the Dark Tower series like 2 paragraphs, and then I stopped reading it. I knew right away that this wasn't going to be the book for me right now. I just hadn't read enough in Stephen King's library. I haven't read enough for that kind of a series to draw me in. So maybe I would like it if I read more Stephen King. Maybe I'll never go back to it, but maybe I will. You never know what happens. So I don't really have a solid answer for this one, just a lot of maybe answers. So number 15 is a question I think was put in here just to see how many people want to become enraged. And the question is, bookmarks or dog ears? And who is dog earing their books? If you're dog earing your books, don't do that. Don't do that. Bookmarks are pretty. You can buy pretty little bookmarks at the bookstore if you need something else to spend your money on. You can make bookmarks if you have a creative side. You could stick your, hairband in it. You could stick a piece of paper in it. You could stick a card from somebody who gave you a card that you find otherwise useless, but you can stick it in your book and suddenly it has new life. You can put a piece of trash in there. You can do anything. Don't dog ear your books. And certainly don't dog ear a book that you've borrowed from someone else, because rude. Number 16 is a book that you can always reread. Well, there are a lot of books like that for me. I mean, I'm an avid rereader. It's one of the things that I'm trying to get away from in doing BookTube. But I'd have to say Harry Potter, of course. I can always reread that series. Hunger Games, I can always reread that series. There are more, but those are the 2 big ones that I could pretty much always pop it up on audiobooks or open up the Kindle and read those and be quite happy to sit and do that. Question number 17. Can you read while listening to music? Yes, I can. And actually, if I'm not doing an audiobook, I prefer to read to music. It helps me to focus, particularly if I'm listening to something techno or something with a beat, or something that I've heard about 3 billion times before, so I don't have to. At that point, I start to tune out the words to it and just I'm listening to the beat and I'm enjoying that. New music would be distracting because I'd want to listen to the lyrics. So just something I've heard a million times or something that's techno. Fun fact, when I was going to college, I had to read a abnormal psychology textbook and pretty much the whole thing. And it was boring. So in order to read it, I put on a 10-hour loop of What Does the Fox Say in order to keep me focused and to drown out my family all around me. 10 hours of What Does the Fox Say, and I could diagnose myself with that abnormal psychology textbook, I'm just saying. So question number 18 is one POV or multiple POVs? And I think it depends. It depends on the skill level of the author, I guess, or how well they are able to pull that off. I like single POVs. Sometimes they can be kind of annoying though, because you kind of want to know what does the other person think, or you want to get a deeper dive into the antagonist, but you can't because it's only in one person's point of view. Sometimes a multiple point of view can be great, but sometimes it can become overwhelming. Sometimes authors will just start willy-nilly grabbing everyone and doing everyone's point of view at some point or another, and that gets a little, I don't know, instead of drawing me in, that seems to disconnect me a little bit from the writing. I start to get jumbled. I start to, I can't keep track of why everyone cares about everything all the time. So narrow it down to a couple people or just one person. As long as they do it well, that's really all that matters. Question number 19 is, do you read a book in one sitting or does it take multiple days? And I used to be able to read books more all in one sitting. I used to, I know this isn't exactly one sitting, but when I was a teenager, sometimes Friday after school, I'd come home and grab a snack or whatever, then go to my room and I would start reading a book. I would start a book Friday night and I would just read it until I was too tired to keep my eyes open. Then I would sleep for a little bit, wake up and keep reading it. And I would just keep reading it until I was done. That's what I did for the weekend. There have been a couple of books when I've been able to get through all of it in one day. But later on in life, now that I have some real focus issues now that I didn't have before, and also I have a lot more draws on my time than I had before, so it takes me multiple days to read a book. Even like the book I'm currently reading, Stoner, is really only a 9-hour read on audiobooks, and I can't really read it all in one day. I mean, I guess I could if I ignored everything else, but I can't ignore everything else, so I take multiple sittings to read a book, but that's okay. And the last question is asking, who do you tag? I don't know that I still feel comfortable enough to tag other people. I don't want to, I don't know who's watching my channel yet, beyond friends and family, and I don't want to put pressure on people if they're not interested or if they're not, or if they maybe already have been tagged and have done this one before. So I'm going to say, if you're a YouTuber who wants to answer 20 questions about what you like about books and reading and stuff, tag, you're right. And if you're not a YouTuber and you're just watching this and you want to answer some of the questions or you want to comment on some of my answers, tag, you're it. Comment away. I would love to hear anything that you have to say. So thank you very much for coming and spending this time with me. I hope that you enjoyed this. I really like these tags because I feel like it helps you kind of get to know me a little bit more. And if you get to know me more, maybe you'll get to care more about my thoughts and feelings or get to understand more my thoughts and feelings on a certain book or series or whatnot. So I really appreciate you coming and spending this time, and I hope that you've enjoyed this. If you did, please consider giving me a like or subscribe if you haven't already. It's free to do. It helps out my channel and it helps keep me present in your your YouTube algorithm, so that way whenever I do a video, it shows up for you. So if you're interested, please do that. And thank you very much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.